Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Evolving Man podcast. Hello to my 1,500 subscribers, which always amazes me. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for turning on the notification bell to inform you when more episodes come out. And thank you for watching, folks. It's a pleasure to be here on YouTube and to have people who are willing to listen to the things that I have to say and that my guests have to say. My guest today on the episode is Mark Groves. Mark Groves is a longtime friend, has been on the show a couple times before, and this interview we conducted in person in Tofino, Canada, on the beach. And we talked about two major topics. We talked about parenthood and his journey in parenthood. He's got a 6-month-old, and it's very much sort of a fireside chat. Two new dads talking about what it's like, what the struggles are, what it does to the relationship, what happens to dads in the first while after the baby comes, what are some of the normal things that dads struggle with. Sneak peek, a lack of connection is one of those things. How to deal with that, how to survive, thrive, and work with the change that's occurred in your life when you've become a father so that you're not a victim of it, but reorienting your internal story to really own your experience. And we also talk about how to prepare yourself before having a kid. If you're considering, should I have a kid or not? Is this really worth it? I think this conversation, particularly for men, will be interesting if you're thinking about having kids. Just seeing a couple new dads sitting and talking about what they're going through. And to be honest, at the end, I ask Mark, is it worth it? Like, just tell me the honest truth about, like, is this parenthood journey really worth it? And would you do it again? You know, if you had to start over. And so he answers that. This was a great conversation. And Mark needs no introduction. I will link to Mark's resources page and all the things that Mark does, but he's a public speaker. He's a public figure, and he does a lot of work with people around relationships, and he's a good friend. So I just enjoyed this conversation. This is a 2-part conversation that we snipped into 2 because the 2 topics are just so separate from one another that it just made sense to do that. So this is part 1, talking about fatherhood, parenthood. Part 2 is going to be about COVID hysteria. Mark and I telling our stories of what that was like to go through and what we learned in the process. So the link to that will be below. But in the meantime, enjoy this conversation with Mark Groves about fatherhood. Mark Groves.
Ben Koreski.
Welcome back to the Evolving Man podcast.
It's great to be back. It's been a while.
It's been a while. You came on twice in pretty quick succession, probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, we did a pod exchange back.
Yeah.
We're back on it.
I remember the title of the 2 episodes. One was Holding Space, which I still send to people from time to time. And the other one was To Be a Man. We're talking about men's work and the plight, the issues of being a man.
Yeah. There's a few.
So here we are.
Despite all our incredible privilege.
So where are we allowed to talk about where we are? Like on the planet right now?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, this is cool. We're outside in Tofino on the beach.
Yeah, we figured why not? First off, we've got a couple kids running around, and they're one of them especially has a higher volume, Ben's child. And we're like, oh, we should just do it outside.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So this is great.
This is awesome.
Podcasting on vacation, right?
I gotta do podcasts on beaches more often.
Yeah. I'm curious how the sound will transfer, but we'll find out. So we probably have an hour before we're needed.
Yeah.
And
totally.
We've been talking about this for a while. We've been talking about having this conversation for a while, and there's 2 things that I feel are important to cover in this conversation. Two things that I really want to hear your perspective on. And if we can relegate them to specific time blocks or sections, I think that would be great. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of crossover, but the two subjects are parenthood, fatherhood, what you've learned, what you would advise other men to do, what mistakes not to make, how does a man prepare for fatherhood, all things fatherhood that you would like to share with my audience. And two, COVID and the crazy shit show of the past few years. And I reached out to you about this a few weeks ago because your voice has been counterculture and strong and courageous in my opinion, and more courageous than my own voice. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of go through that with you and talk about lessons learned and talk about how we prepare for the future. So,
those are both. I'm excited to dive into all of that.
All right.
6-month-old. So I let me add a qualifier for all of you. I am by no means a father parenting expert.
Yeah, right.
But man, it's been I think as a couple, that's been probably my greatest learning thus far, other than learning how to take these applied pieces of knowledge, which I know you've experienced too, of like, what does co-regulating mean? What does it mean to be attuned and to be present to your child, and to see all these competing things for your attention and really know that they're the most important thing in the world, which I know can be challenging when there's other things that are important. But man, for me, I think being a couple has been the most challenging. And not in the context that, I guess you get into this space where you've done a lot of individual collective work communication-wise. You've learned a lot about it. I mean, it's my work, it's your work.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, I'm kind of nailed most of this part, although having a strong-willed, strong-voiced woman will always invite you to continue to grow, which is such a gift, almost always.
There will always be challenges.
Yeah. And especially as, Kai evolves, and then as she stepped into motherhood, you're just both so emotionally depleted. And what I noticed was there was a lot of, like, I'd done work on defensiveness. I'd done work on the way I structure language, like, in criticism, how the discussion is about starting sentences with like, you always, you never.
Yeah.
I find myself dropping the old always.
You're right.
And then being like, oh man, I'm getting sloppy with my communication.
Right.
And it's really allowed me to have a deeper window into where the work is still undone, and what emotional depletion does to us, which is really correlated to the second subject too.
So is that why you think you're getting sloppy? Because there's this baseline, your baseline has come down in terms of your own nourishment, your own mental and emotional health, because you're tired and your energy is more scattered. Like, what do you attribute that to, that you getting sloppy?
I think it's a bunch of things. I think it's one, I'm more tired, feeling kind of more spread thin. Got the pressure of providing that leans on me. And often I'm thinking about things I need to get done while I'm consumed by something that's related to parenting, which I recognize the beautiful sort of tension that lives in that.
Right.
And yet, Jasper, that's our son's name, he reminds me always that what's most important is what's at hand.
Right in front of him.
Yeah, and how much of my psyche can be captured by these other things when really he should be the thing capturing my psyche. So just coming back to that, not shaming myself for that. The other side of it too is that, the sloppiness is is due to, there's a saying that the work works. Like when you're tooled up, my friend Brandon says that, when you're tooled up, like the tools work, like
Right.
in the times when you need them.
Yep.
And I would say that my, the knowing of how to structure dialogue, like Imago dialogue or whatever it might be, the knowing of how to structure it, how to listen, how to mirror, how to validate. Yeah, those orders or those thoughts of processes are like out the window till I can catch myself. And then I'd say the other thing that weighs a bit or like lives in the unconscious reactivity, just as I explore it with you, and I've explored this with Kylie too, is that like Kylie and I went from being a couple to being a family.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the death of us as a relationship, like just her and I.
Right.
And I don't mean that like, we died. No, I mean like there's literally like not literally, there's a death of the way we were, and there's a new way of being.
For sure.
Earth.
There's
right.
a real change.
So we go from 2 to 3.
Yep.
And that's a big thing. But the other thing, and I'm curious your experience of this too, is that Kylie and Jasper have each other all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. So, like, I get cuddles from him, and I get some cuddles from her, because we're still in the newborn-y phase. But, like, really, when I sit with, like, the ability to be in the sense of, like, what did it feel like to be the youngest child? My default emotional lens when I'm feeling hurt is, like, what about me?
Mm-hmm.
Martyry.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm over here, too.
Yeah.
And so Kylie and I have talked about just that, like, she's getting all this nourishment from Jasper, and not needing any nourishment from me.
Right.
And used to need nourishment from me. Now nourishment looks different now, because the nourishment is, let me take Jasper, let me grab Jasper,
Right.
let me do something with Jasper.
Yeah.
Not, hey, let me take you.
Yeah.
That's,
yeah.
and then intimacy. See you later for a little while.
Goodbye for a bit. Yeah, we talked about this. Shay and I talked about this on a previous episode about how that dynamic really shifts, and it's a lot for both partners, but I think it hits men especially hard, where that physical contact, a lot of us lose it. Apparently 20% of couples split up in the first year of having a child.
Yeah, I've been looking at that kind of data, and I'm like, I don't think well, first off, a lot of people have kids when they're already fucked.
A lot of people have kids just like 50% of kids happen unplanned, right?
Yeah,
so you get new couples.
Totally.
There's that's a full mixed
One
bag
night
of people.
stands that bring in. That's not the ideal coupledom.
No, so there's not your ideal setup. That doesn't. It's in there, but that's a tiny portion of that data. But,
that's interesting. But I don't think couples should be allowed to divorce in at least the first couple of years of their kid's life.
I mean, it's probably the hardest time you're ever going to have as a couple is that first year. Because
so hard.
That connection, this is one of the main sources, right? They say that it's due to conflict and a lack of intimacy, lack of sex, particularly. And I think there's exceptions to that rule in terms of, not having a lot of intimacy. But I think that is generally the rule.
Couples who are boning all the time. I'm like, how are you going to Bone Town already?
How does that
we went
happen?
for our 6-week follow-up, I think it was. I think it was 6 week.
Uh-huh.
And because that's when they asked, like, hey.
Are you having sex?
Yeah, the midwife goes, hey, are you guys having sex? And I'm like, wait. Are you kidding? Like, do people say yes to this question? And she was like, rarely, but we have to ask because of, healing. But I was like, wow, people are already banging? Like, I don't even.
Yeah.
I was like, way to go.
Good on you.
But I also thought, is that because on some level the woman's need for healing is being bypassed by the man's need for sex?
I would imagine.
That's what I was thinking. Like, because Kylie was certainly not in the place, and she's like, it just feels so vulnerable, like, at this point, and I'm not ready, and sure.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that conversation is, yeah.
So this thing is a real thing that guys need to prepare for. in parenthood
Yeah.
is this shift in the dynamic. Like you and Kai, Shay and I used to have pretty much all the time we wanted to process any shit that was coming up.
Totally.
Right? Like we could do a Mago
Now you gotta
dialogue.
like fast speed it, high speed it.
Yeah, all day long we used to be able to do it. Now it's like if we could find, for her and I, if we can find half an hour in the week to sit down and do that, that's how it's been for the last year. We're starting to reclaim some time. It was a really intense first year, but for us, that's a lot less time to work on our relationship maintenance, and it takes its toll. And
Yeah,
I
agreed.
think there is a piece there where, that is significant for men that you're describing, where women are getting so much touch from their child. And in fact, sometimes they get touched out and they just like, they don't want to be touched by
too
anyone.
much.
Yeah. Whereas the male partner is really left to like, he's got to be in his own center. And that's one of the things that I want guys to know is like, get really secure in your own center, and your own, learning to nurture your own feminine energy from within yourself, because there will be times in your relationship, especially when there's a child in the picture, a new child in the picture, and mom is consumed with that, where she may have none of that to give, and you got to have your own practices to make it through that. And I think some men don't prepare for that. They're not prepared for that. They might expect that their partner be available for sex after 6 weeks. And then when she's not, when she has more boundaries than she's ever had, because she's just getting more and more clear about her yeses and nos, and she's got a bigger priority. She has to. She has to take care of herself. He's butthurt. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know where to take that energy. And he starts to withdraw from the relationship because it's no longer a fit,
Yeah, and there might not be space for his grief, because I think sometimes the reaction to the grief that the man is having is, oh, here's another need.
Right.
I don't need another baby or another child.
Yeah, this is very selfish of you.
Right. And I feel blessed because our relationship can hold my grief, my, whatever is coming up for me, and that it doesn't detract or diminish what she's giving.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand if you're not in your center, as you're speaking to, then you're much more prone to infidelity. You're much more prone to someone else giving you attention who's who's going to hear you out, and then you're going to create, oh, this other person actually has time for me. Now I conceptually can understand that. I didn't understand it before with kids, but I understand it now. But what I practice, what you're saying, is coming back to my partner with the grief, with the thing, with also, what are we going to create from here? Because now we're starting to get some air, and we can feel that, and we're excited. We went on a walk today, like a hike today, with him in the facing front out.
Nice.
And that's the first time we've done that together. Like, I'm either hiking by myself or, and that's it. Actually, there's no other.
Right.
And that makes me excited, for that to start to emerge. And also for knowing, like, taking the energy that I've had and actually channeling it into transformation. Like, one gift that fatherhood has provided me is that now I'm really in the emotional gym and the communication gym, but the main second one is I've accessed a level of discernment I didn't have before. And what I mean by, discipline and discernment, in that I'm like, oh my God, why don't I use what's going on right now to fuel me becoming fitter than I've ever been in my life?
Right.
And like really in my disciplines. And I was listening to a audiobook from Grant Cardone, the like real estate, like savage guy.
Yeah.
And his book, 10X Mindset, have you heard it?
I haven't. I've listened to his podcast, but I haven't read his book.
So in that book, he says, if I was to get one thing from it that was like, he said, you have an ethical obligation to be successful. And he's like, not just successful in terms of stepping into your purpose, and you define success how you want. But he said, ethical obligation to have a successful marriage, to have a successful everything. And I was like, oh, wow. Like when you connect your ethics and your integrity, which I think one of the greatest ways for men to transform is to find something that matters to them so much that they tie their integrity to.
Men are
But we're so
purpose-driven.
used to being out of our integrity that coming back into it, you know, again, attaches its own grief.
Mm-hmm. We're purpose-driven. And we live in a time and a world where finding your purpose is harder than it's ever been. You know, it used to be your purpose was kind of right in front of you because survival.
Right, like you're a hunter.
Right? Or
you're a medicine man.
Yeah, like you're probably born into a particular lineage and that's your purpose.
You're a carpenter.
You're figure it out.
Yeah, you're a doctor, you're a medicine, whatever it is.
But now we're in this place where it's like you can do anything you want.
Which is a beautiful thing, but also you're right. Now you're in this paradox of choice where you actually have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you were just born and you just took a role in a village, that, you know, there's some real, you know, that saying there's liberation through limitation.
Yes.
I gotta say, we got so many options now. We are struggling to even choose what gender we are.
Yeah.
You know, and I say that with love, but like, this is how big our problems are.
Yeah. Everything's bending. Everything's bending.
Yeah,
Everything's blurring.
God forbid we find some, you know, direction, but this lack of direction, which I think, you know, that's a whole other podcast, but like connected to diverse attention and the fact that we are really, our minds and our attention is being exploited by the algorithms of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And biologically, we are not designed to have the opinion of 10,000 people, a billion people on our doorstep based on every thought, feeling, and whatever we might post or we might, you know, I think we're in an interesting time that way too.
Yeah, it's almost like, just as you were speaking about that, I had this vision of people 100, 200 years ago being sort of very grounded in their place, in the earth, in their community.
Yeah.
This sort of lower, I don't know if it's a lower chakra thing, but it's just like
It's like rooted.
more rooted,
Yeah.
right? In their community, in their family, in their place, in their career, whatever it was in front of them. And it's like over time, as technology has spun up and become bigger and bigger and more widespread, and the internet switched on, and then we start spreading further and further, and our attention does the same thing, what we're paying attention to, right? And it's like we're swirling out,
Yeah.
and we're losing. It's like when you spin something around and the water flies out of it. It's like we're losing ourselves in a way, and I only see it getting worse and worse. But
I agree.
This is why I love some of the work you do and some of the, like the men's work stuff, that is a reclamation for a person individually to get grounded in their life and choose their path. And do you know Jason Gaddis?
Yeah.
Yeah, Relationship School. I listened to a podcast that he recorded for his friends to prepare them for fatherhood. And one of the things that he said in that was, you need to get your head in a place where you are consciously choosing everything that's in front of you, your family, you know, like when you're going through the shit in your family, being able to say to yourself, I chose this and I choose this. Not as a way of like
responsibility of that.
Yeah. Not as a way of being like, you asked for it, buddy. Like you get what you asked for, loser. But like this, like,
but like you're
no,
in it.
I wanted a family. This is a family. It's hard. I'm going to own that, and I'm going to deal with this right here and right now.
I love that, because I recognize that like I'm in the gym. Like this is the gym. And what a disservice to me, to Jasper, to Kylie, to the world, to step out of the gym, to be like, you know, because I'm not going to turn away from hard relational challenges. To me, I'm like, oh my God, on the other side of this, what I do know on the other side of this, because I'm accepting the invitation, is a deeper relationship, deeper trust, deeper intimacy. And what I'm also learning is that prior to us having a child, there was space for me to not be great at advocating for my needs. And now I'm recognizing that I haven't really been that good at it, you know, surviving the fawn response from being a child, you know?
Yeah.
That, oh, wow, when I think I've taken up space, there's still more space to take up. But to share, not take up maybe is the wrong word now, but to share. But I like that insight from Jason. I think it demonstrates, like, when you can access as a man that sort of warrior direction, creation, what you're talking about, this being rooted in the earth. Like, I think about Francis Weller's work where he talks about, I think it's the Maasai people. I can't remember what tribe he talks about, but when a man is 13, around that age, they get painted black, and they walk through the town, and the town is told to ignore them because their life as a boy is over. And through that initiation, they become a man, and they are given, I believe, a new name. But especially what I do remember is that they're also now responsible for the village.
Right.
And I'm like, like, how many of us, other than Jewish tradition, which has like the bar mitzvah, you know, how many of us have an initiation that isn't uncontained, like occurs externally, not by choice, a breakup, bullying, whatever, an injury,
a culturally sculpted
right
thing,
where we're not actually prepared for, because our father and our uncles being friends too of our father, haven't said, welcome. Welcome. Here is what it means to be a man now. And not this, like, are you man enough? But this embracing of what it means to be masculine. And I think this, because we use terms like toxic masculinity, we throw out the baby with the bathwater. We throw out any healthy versions of masculinity, which is this leadership, this protection. You know, and our culture, you know, the guy who directed Avatar, James Cameron, he said that testosterone is a toxic hormone. And I was like, that is so dumb.
It's so dumb.
Love
it's so
Avatar,
laughable.
great movie.
Yeah.
But testosterone is not the problem. Unintegrated, traumatized people are the problem.
Yeah.
And when we can hold space for that men have been traumatized, and if we're talking about the term patriarchy is traumatizing to everybody, and it's also the system that evolutionarily created where we are today. So you can't only hate it, you also have to appreciate it, which I think that becomes real. In our world right now, we're given a binary. You either like something or you hate it. You're either for something, you're against it.
You're not allowed to hold two separate ideas at the same time.
I refuse to participate in that game anymore. I used to do the little dance of language, but I now see that, you know, God Sod talks about how we're murdering truth for feelings. Fuck that. I ain't doing that anymore.
What if toxic masculinity is the thing that emerges as a result of a society that does not properly initiate their masculine representatives?
Yeah, doesn't properly initiate men,
right?
And doesn't honor the matriarch, like both, right? Like,
then you get this toxicity in the system,
right? And look at, for example, in the U.S., a lot of the companies, I believe the minimum maternity leave is 6 weeks.
It's awful. Yeah.
But most companies at the most do 3 months. And I'm like, oh my God, watching Jasper with his mother, I couldn't imagine that she was already back at work. And this is not judging anyone for the responsibilities in having to do things. That's a whole other challenge of our culture, that the cost of living often requires 2 working parents. But why are we not in a place where the companies that you have female employees, and I get bottom lines and all that kind of stuff. Again, this is a nuanced point, but we can get to a place where we value the mother and we value the father and those roles, rather than just being producers for, you know, the big machine, the cogs in the wheel, which, I mean, we very often are till we choose not to be.
Yeah, we're very lost in the rat race, and we're spun out, right? We're spun out, and our egos are inflated. And
Yeah.
I would argue that we actually have a lot of immaturity in men and women.
Agreed.
And, you know, our society is very privileged. And a sign of immaturity is an inflated ego. I was listening to an animist the other day. This doctor from Finland, I believe, he was talking about animism. And he was sharing about initiations and what the common threads are between initiation rites, and basically he described how boys will be, they're usually the ones who are initiated in this way, where they are put through a series of challenges that essentially break them. They break their ego. It crushes their ego, because through ego dissolution you realize the larger thing that you're connected to, your community. And you realize like, oh, like when your ego dies, you realize like what's holding you. And it's the people around you. It's your village. It's the larger culture that's sort of got you.
Yeah.
And you also realize your responsibility in contributing to that. And so there's this element of like breaking the overinflated ego that every 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old seems to have, right? It's just part of that
20, 21.
development.
I used to think I knew so much.
Yeah.
Like, I got this figured out with my frosted tips.
But for me, one of the best things that ever happened to me was I got crushed in drug rehab when I was 15. And that necessitated or precipitated a spiritual experience for me.
Do you mean the personal growth aspect of rehab?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the 12-step kind of. When my sister, when she did the 12 steps, I looked at them with her, and I'm sober now, but I didn't go through 12 steps because it wasn't like it was by choice to quit, just not because I was finding myself on, waking up in the wrong place, although I have woken up in the wrong place. But when I looked at the 12 steps, I had done
a lot of what's there.
Yeah, and the most powerful ones, I think it's 4, 5, and 6, are the ones where you like take responsibility for your impact on other people, and then you repair.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, holy shit, everybody should do the 12 steps. Like, I remember thinking that, and I'd go to like a meeting with her in Kitsilano, which basically was just a bunch of very attractive people. I remember being at it. I'm like, there's so many handsome men and beautiful, just in general, beautiful people here. And it was like being at TED Talks. I was like so inspired by all these people.
Yeah.
But yeah, so interesting. So through your experience with rehab, you were blasted into self-inquiry.
Yeah.
And all the ways you'd build stories, and wow. I mean, that is such a gift that young, if we're willing to accept it. I didn't have the challenges till later in my late 20s that would lead me to who am I and why do I do what I do? I hadn't asked that.
Yeah. And so like I got lucky in a way by ending up in rehab and then having particularly strong men who were willing to step in my way. And
at your rehab?
Yes. Essentially slap me and be like, wake the fuck up, wake up. And, look at your life, Wow. And what are you feeling, I think guys need that kind of intensity, and they need it from conscious, mature men.
Initiated men, who are like, who take responsibility for their life. That's the key, I think we can smell when someone is teaching something but not being something.
Yeah.
It's a big difference in how, I think the alchemical process of how words land comes through the legitimacy of the speaker.
You can feel it.
Yeah.
So, before we've already been on this subject for like half an hour, but before we transition out of this, fatherhood, parenthood, what remaining tips or thoughts do you have for men who are about to become parents or who are new parents? Like, what wisdom can you impart upon them?
Mine's so fresh. I'll say the one, for me, one of the most important things, especially in that first 3 to 4 months, was like, how do I support Kai? I took 10 weeks off with no work, which was really important. And I'm so happy I did. I hadn't done that, like completely off. And
Feels good, right?
it felt so good. It felt so good. And then I was itching at the bit to get back, Uh, and so I think if you can do that, if that's something you can afford to do, or it can be provided by where you live, paternity leave,
Mm-hmm.
do it, because that was like one of the most powerful, was being able to be that present and to be able to support Kai and Jasper
Mm-hmm.
through that. The other thing, I've been talking about the grief of sort of feeling like the other,
Yeah.
which is a feeling but not a truth. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not the other. I'm one of the people in that system.
Yep.
And one thing one of my mentors told me was like, for the first time in your life is not about you. And you need to grieve that, but you also need to grow up into that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, yes. And so I would say, if you're becoming a father, or you've had reluctance accepting, the grief that comes with the loss of the old self, is actually recognizing, like, what a beautiful gift it is for your life not to be about you.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to, you were talking about how much time we've all had to be able to navigate Imago dialogue prior.
Yep.
When I had Jasper, I was like, holy shit, I used to have so much free time that I didn't even know I had.
Yeah.
Like, so I think
Yeah.
the other thing is getting regimented, because without actually some commitment to your rituals and practices, especially trying to wake up before mom and baby, which can be hard, of course.
Yep.
But that has been, if I don't get my workout in then, or I don't get it in, it's like it's not getting in.
Mm-hmm.
But I need it. Like, those are the things I need, because once baby and mom are up, baby's getting handed to me. And that's all exactly how it's supposed to be.
Yep.
But I still need my, like, prep for the day time. And Kylie and I have been sleeping in separate beds for a little bit now. And that actually has been a gift for my sleep, to be able to show up for work.
Because she sleeps with the baby.
Yeah.
Right.
And I went away for work for a week, and I came back, and I was like, man, I slept pretty good.
Yeah.
Actually,
right.
I came back and I was tired, and I was like, babe, I'm going to sleep in the other bed just for tonight. I just need to catch up on sleep, because I'd been working and flying. And she was like, yeah, cool. And the next day, I was like building up the courage to say to her, like, I slept pretty good. Like, maybe. And she says to me, hey, I wanted to talk to you about last night. Like, I slept really good. Jasper and I did. And I was like, I mean, if you need me to sleep in the other bed, I'll take the grenade.
We did the same thing. We've been on and off. We started in the same bed, all three of us,
Same.
with Bodhi, and on and off. And yeah, I slept separate from her for 2-3 months. Now we're back all in the same bed. We're actually in Soraya's room, all sleeping
That's
in
funny.
her bed on the floor. Yeah. And
we were 8 weeks
for now
together, and then out. So you're back on the floor.
Yeah, the mattress on the floor. Yeah, because
That's
she can't roll off of it and bonk her head as well.
She's a little turbo.
She's a flailer.
She will jump.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot of lessons in that share that you just gave. One is flexibility and just learning how to take care of yourself, for sure. I'd say that was the core piece, is like, get really good at your self-care and be vigilant about your self-care. It doesn't have to take up your whole day, but you need to carve out the right time, find the space to make sure that you're operating in an optimal way. The other thing that I heard you say was that you had a mentor and that you were talking to your mentor about things. And I think a lot of men could learn from that as well. It's like, if your wife is the only one that you talk to about stuff in your life, get ready for trouble, because you're not really going to have anyone to talk to. And apparently that's the majority of men, don't really have anyone to talk to. And so there's really not any excuses for that these days, because there are plenty of ways that you can connect to other people. We have the internet now, and everyone
men's groups. You
has
could do
the internet.
international men's groups. You could do digital. You could do local.
But find a place to get support. And sometimes support just means being able to tell your story of what's going on in your life and have other people go, yeah, that's a lot, dude. We hear ya. That's a huge relief for people, for guys.
Yeah, I think as a father, that was because I'm part of a men's group too. And there are, out of the 8 of us, there are 4 fathers.
Right.
So it was so helpful when I'm like, hey, are you guys, has this? And they're all like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, get ready.
Yeah.
So that's, I think the other thing, if you're preparing for fatherhood, as you were just alluding to, it's like, find actually other people who are dads
Yep.
that you feel comfortable sharing your challenges and your fears. And when we did our birth preparation course with we worked with midwives in Vegas. They had the parenting prep classes, the birth prep,
Right.
and so it was cool being with other parents who were from all walks of life,
Yeah.
which was super cool.
People
'Cause
getting
you got
ready.
to see because there were some 21-year-olds in there, and
Yeah.
here I am, the senior citizen.
I got a few
Yeah.
grays.
Yeah. But how smart these young people are, because young people have so much access to so much information now.
Yeah.
That I'm like, wow, these young bucks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some other things that I've been learning about how important fathers are in their kids' lives. And Warren Farrell writes about this in The Boy Crisis, and it's largely around boys, but there's a lot of gender neutral studies that he shares in there. And how I think something that I would want dads to know is your presence is valuable in your child's life, and your role is not just to schlep, as we call it, take out the garbage, fold up the cardboard, bring the groceries in, go run errands, because we do a lot of that. We do, it's very important. We do a lot of that.
I do a lot of folding cardboard.
Yeah, a lot of heavy lifting, and it just makes sense. But there's a type of energy that mom gives her son or daughter that a father can't give. And,
Great.
There's breast milk and all of that, but there's an energetic type of care that a mother obviously gives her child that the father doesn't. But the father also has this special kind of different energy that it's helpful. It has its place in the relationship.
It's essential.
Play and just the different way of reacting to kid getting hurt or emotions or needs. Your presence is needed with your kid at all stages. And so where you can, step in and be there. Don't just be a side project, and don't let your feelings of feeling like the outsider in that relationship push you further away. Because I have this avoidant tendency, right? When I'm feeling left out or hurt, I'll push myself further out. I'm not needed here. Okay, well, I'm out of here. I'll just go do the garbage and the laundry and the dishes, and then I'll go,
I'll make loud noises to see if anyone wants to see how I am.
Yeah, that doesn't go very well when the baby's trying to sleep.
The Gottmans talk about how, I think it was John who talked about this in a podcast I listened to, that the relationship between mom and dad in the third trimester is actually very predictive of the child's outcomes, which I remember being like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And what you're saying about the father, Mark Wolin, who wrote the book, It Did Start With You.
Yep.
I was talking to him, and he was saying that the mother prepares the neurocircuitry for the child, not just in utero, but through attunement and attachment, and prepares. I love how he said this. He's writing a new book, so I think it's where his book's going.
That's right. He told me.
But he said the mother prepares the child for the world, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing now, to hand the child to the father, for the father to take the child into the world, onto the adventure.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so cool, because that's exactly my experience. Is
Me too.
I'm touring Jasper around the trees
Me
and
too.
dancing and hiding and popping out, and and he's like, whoa, there's dad again.
Yeah.
And we offer a different avenue, and humor is also one of the greatest qualities of relationship masters. So learning how to integrate humor and quell conflict.
Humor, goofiness, rough and tumble play, and adventure. Yeah, I'm the one who's hucking her,
Same.
8
First
feet
time I
in
did
the
that,
air.
he was like, I remember he's like,
yeah. But she's learning to
hucking her in the air.
yeah, hey,
funny.
Dad, take me on an adventure, know?
Right.
And adventure is where you go to your edge and you learn and you grow.
They trust themselves. They touch everything. They're learning. They eat pine cones.
Yeah. So last question, because I think a lot of conversation around parenthood often sounds perhaps from the outside like, wow, that's a lot of work. I'm not sure it's worth it. So the last question is it worth it? Would you recommend it?
I would recommend it. I remember meeting this guy who was having his third kid, and I said to him, because we were only 7 weeks in, and I said to him, "Do you forget?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Do you forget the newborn phase?" And he's like, "Yeah, actually, I think you do." And I was like, because that's the only way I can imagine anyone has a second kid. And he was laughing. His wife was laughing. But now that we're out of that phase, I'm like, I could have another one. Because Jasper it is so cool to see the combination of your DNA. And for people who adopt, I'm sure the same experience. You look into this child and you're like, it is my job to prepare you for this world. Like, what a gift. And to see his little personality emerge. And I was saying before, the gift that he gives me too is this, like, now the things that I'm really learning to be disciplined about are actually coming through him. Like through the love that I have for him. I mean, now also the algorithm knows I'm a dad, so it sends me funny dad reels.
Yeah, I got so many fun dad reels.
Dude, they're so good.
You know why? It's because your wife sends you a few of them. You watch them, you like them, and it knows. Now it knows.
It knows full well, but I do appreciate its creepy monitoring so I can laugh more. But it's 100% worth it. I would recommend it 1,000,000 times to everybody if that's in, the plans.
Yeah.
It's the greatest gift. I think it's important that, as you were saying, before we hit record, is like, it's important that you talk about all the things because you got to prepare for the challenges that come with this stuff. And man, the gifts are... And the gift of the love that you're sharing as a couple is a different kind of love.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really what's getting us through this. Because if you went through the same type of challenges without a baby, you'd break up probably. Because you wouldn't have something that's like, oh, wow, this is so worth it. Look at this little pooping, peeing, screaming, loving, laughing machine.
It's a bigger, in a way, it's a bigger commitment than marriage. Right? Like you tie the knot in marriage.
Way bigger.
Right? Like you sign the contract and all that, and you have the community there to witness your promise. But when you have a baby, you tie a knot that's made up of a physical body, and it's living and breathing. True. And like that's always there between you.
Louis C.K. has this great thing where it's like, marriage doesn't mean anything. He's like, because it's a clip of him when he gets married and then a clip after when he's divorced. But he says marriage doesn't mean anything till you have kids. It doesn't mean shit, because when you get married, you're like, I can't leave now. And he's like, then you have kids and you're like, I should have left. But like that, you're right. It is a bigger commitment. It's such a big commitment, and I think anything that inspires you to learn the level of your commitments is actually a gift that you need to explore, like marriage, but that could just be partnership. And I don't mean just, but that could be partnership and these containers that force us to cook, to change, to become, and having a child is that. And Jordan Peterson has a great quote where he says, commitment only works when you do it. And I think so many of us say we're going to do things, or like we're so used to giving our word to things, and then we're used to letting ourselves down or letting people down. Yep. And what a thing it is to know that you can't let a child down. I mean, you can, and then they end up needing therapy.
Yeah, you've just got to show up.
You've just participated in creating more of a market.
Yeah.
Which, hey, listen, none of us are going to do it perfectly, and that's the beauty of being a human is you have diverse experiences that are painful that shape you.
But the journey's worth it. I would also recommend it.
Do you love it?
I love it too. But
you're such a good dad.
I'm older. Thank you.
I'm older too. Would I have had one at 22? I mean, I'm sure happy I didn't. But if you did, enjoy the personal growth later in life, I suppose.
Yeah, I meet people who that's their path. They just devoted everything to raising their kid in their 20s, and then they get back to themselves in their late 30s.
Now they're in Tofino without kids. That's the difference. All my friends who had kids when we were like 25, 27, 28. They're all now, their kids are like 14, 15, and they're like, going on trips with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so different. We flipped when they were like, Mark's living this free life, traveling everywhere. Now I'm going to be like, look at him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it for this part of the episode, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Thanks for subscribing, liking, turning on the notification bell. If you're interested in listening to the second part of this conversation with Mark on COVID hysteria, we will link to it. And if you're a man who is interested in seeking counsel from other men, in getting support from other men, particularly around relationships, in preparation for having a child, or if you're not planning on having a kid, or if you're a dad and you feel like you need some help in how you do relationships, you need some more tools to help you with relationships, check out the program that I run called the Conscious Relationship Council. It's a 12-week live men's group where we take guys through a course, but we teach it live. So there's a teaching component, but there's also coaching and support for a small group of guys. The Conscious Relationship Council, we run that 3 times a year. You can check it out in the show notes. It's also on my website, evolvingman.com. Thanks, as always, folks, for engaging with this content, for sharing it with other people, and for doing your own work. All the best. We'll see you next time.